Guys, the ink on the ceasefire agreement document between Israel and Iran isn't even dry yet, and Israel is already threatening Iran again. Defense Minister, creatively named Israel Katz, just announced what he calls a policy of enforcement, basically saying Israel will strike Iran whenever it wants to prevent them from rebuilding their military capabilities and advancing their nuclear weapons program. Whenever. Because, treaties, agreements, don't be silly, they don't apply to us. This is happening literally days after a ceasefire ended a brutal 12-day conflict between Israel and Iran, where Israel initially struck and targeted Iranian military commanders, nuclear scientists, and nuclear infrastructure, and later moved on to energy infrastructure, and Iran, of course, responded. Iran agreed to the US proposed ceasefire after their ballistic missiles proved they could reach all Israeli territory and US bases and bring damage to Israel on a scale Israel has never faced from any adversary in the history of their country, the short history of their country, it might be. Israel was also forced to agree to the ceasefire despite initial resistance from them. Those Iranian missiles, after all, were leaving a fat dent each whenever they got through, and Israeli interceptor missiles, according to Israeli sources themselves, they were 2 weeks away from running out completely. Let me just point out the change, though, in tone from the Israeli state as now the ceasefire is holding, but you hear the rhetoric's changing. The panicked flailing by the Israeli state is, when it comes to their stated war goals, is really all over the place, right? First, you guys remember, right? June 30th, you guys remember. Why did Israel attack Iran? Why did they claim they attacked Iran? What was their narrative? Iran's a few days away from making a nuke, just like they were 5 years ago, just like they were 10 years ago. But now they're really, I promise you, pinky swear, they're a few days away from making a nuke, so we have to go in there, bring them some self-defense. First, it was Iran's nuclear capabilities. Then Israel got hit by those Iranian missiles during that 12-day war, many punching through their 5-layer Israeli defenses at some point. 5 layers, I have to say. I used to say 4 layers. Now it's 5 layers, right? Now Israel is saying we need to remove Iran's nuclear capabilities and their missile capabilities. So they had 5-layer defenses. The ballistic missiles got through many times reliably. Not 100%, not 90% even. 90% were blocked. But 10% getting through is bad news for you. 10%, 20% getting through is bad news for you. If they start hitting things that you really don't want hit, which is pretty much anything in your, geographically small country. 5-layer defense, right? Iron Dome, David Sling, Arrow, Patriot, THAAD. THAAD was bad. Patriot betrayed its country. Arrow was pointing to the exit, but Ben Gurion Airport was closed because citizens by the Israeli state's command weren't allowed to leave during the conflict. Now they're allowed to leave, and they are, a lot of them. David Sling couldn't stop a thing. Iron Dome, Iron Sieve. Okay, I thought I'd just mention those because there's this perception Israel's impenetrable, and really, analytically speaking, whatever side you're on, it's not. So you have to operate in realpolitik, in geopolitical reality, and Israel's struggling to do that. For better or worse, Israel's struggling to do that because they've spent too long with a blank check from the US every month. Whatever you want. They keep getting whatever they want. So now their heads like sort of inflated to the point where they think we can do whatever we want. But you can't, right? Iran sort of brought that back down to reality. Nothing says Israel talking now about expanding their war goal. This time we're going to come back in again, not just for your nukes, but also for your ballistic missiles. Nothing says strategic wisdom, like taking a bite, realizing it's more than you can chew, spitting it out because you can't swallow it, right? And then coming back for round 2 for an even bigger bite. Also, I thought Israel said Iran's nuclear capabilities were completely destroyed. What happened? Why do they still need destroying now then? It's hard to keep track of state lies if you lie too often in a short period of time. I'm not being anti-Israel. All states lie at a geopolitical, at a diplomatic level. All states lie. Okay, I want you guys to know that. Don't think China or Russia or Iran or the US or UK. Don't think any country doesn't lie. All states lie. But I'm saying if a state lies a bit more sparingly, they can at least maintain this grand narrative with no plot holes. Whereas this has more plot holes than Iron Dome. Now, here's what's really happening behind the scenes. Iran has consistently signaled it wants peace and stability in the region. It benefits. If you watch my previous videos, Iran benefits from a long-term peace because it allows them to grow out of Western-led sanctions, fully align with China and the global South, and basically unlock their economy's potential. Their mountainous, oil-rich, high population country with a potentially huge economy, but Western sanctions have kept them suppressed, right? So Iran just needs time. The United States, also facing economic pressures and war fatigue itself from Middle Eastern wars in the past, they also prefer diplomatic solutions, especially as the US fears getting bogged down in a Middle East conflict and then China pulling ahead economically or making a grab for Taiwan in some way. They can't afford that. They can't, and there's no benefit from them coming into the Middle East to support Israel when really American interests in the Middle East are fading, right? But Israel needs something completely different from the two I just mentioned. Iran, US want peace. Israel, how about no? They really don't want peace, right? With regional powers like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Turkey, and Egypt closely aligned with the American interests, Iran represents Israel's last major state-level opposition in the Middle East. Breaking Iranian power would give Israel complete regional dominance, guys, for a time. No, indefinitely. The problem, though, is Israel can't achieve this alone. To break Iran, they need the US. They need sustained American military support for a long-term campaign against Iran. Ideally, with American boots on the ground, definitely not, Israeli boots on the ground. Don't be silly. Can't sacrifice our men. We have to send down someone less valuable in our view, right? But Washington isn't biting. They're not willing to commit to another endless Middle Eastern war. So Israel threatens and strikes, hoping to provoke Iran into responses that would force American intervention. This comes back to what I was saying during the 12-day war. I was saying Israel's poking and is poking and is poking, hoping that Iran smacks it across the face in frustration, and then it can take his red, swollen cheek to Big Daddy USA and say, "Look, Big Daddy, look what they did to me." Look. I don't know why it sounds Indian. We have to talk about India as well. A Pakistani minister called Narendra Modi basically Benjamin Netanyahu from Temu. That was an insult on so many levels. But we'll get to that another time. That's what Israel needs. They need to pull America in, and they kind of failed round one. Now, Iran knows this game perfectly. They knew before round one, they knew during round one, they still know now. If round two pops up, they know that they can't, overdo it. They have to hold back their punches. Otherwise, it might be, their punch might justify intervention by outside powers. That's why Iran has prepared for multiple rounds of conflicts while publicly calling for peace. Sivi pacem para bellum, as the Latin saying goes. If you wish for peace, prepare for war, and Iran is ready. Their missile capabilities, demonstrated during this recent fight, showed they can impose real economic costs on Israel. So, attacking Iran again would not come for free, right? Attacking other stateless people, attacking other nations where their military is completely dissolved, that Israel can do that, right? It can dish out, no problem. It can't take though, and Iran forces it to take. The ceasefire itself proves Iran's strategy is succeeding. They forced Israel to stop through military pressure, not diplomacy, because they know that the language of Israel, the language of the West by and large, is the language of force. You can't appeal to reason. You can't appeal to a rules-based world order, because they think rules only apply to the poor countries. It's like, look at the audacity of the rest trying to impose rules on me, the West. The audacity. That's how they operate. So, but then if you show force, they're like, oh, I actually physically can't get beyond, can't get over this hurdle. So I guess I'll have to respect them in some way. That's the analytical reality of the current geopolitical situation globally. If you have the force, if you can afford it, in terms of your power, you can probably get it. If you can't wrestle it from the hands of your adversaries with power, don't expect to appeal to reason. That's ridiculous. It's never worked. Now Iran waits, prepared for whatever comes next, while Israel threatens from a position that's actually, analytically speaking, weaker than pre-June 13th. If they attack again, Iran will know it's coming. The Israeli intelligence infiltration capabilities are strong. It has to be said. You can't get over that. But Iran is on high alert, and Israel used up some of their sabotage capabilities pre-June 13th. It's not going to be as easy for a surprise attack. It's basically going to be impossible to conduct a surprise attack. And Ayatollah Khamenei is still in hiding, by and large. That is probably because Iran expects, for better or worse, but in terms of the human cost and the civilian cost, I can say, even being unbiased, I can say it is for the worst. Iran expects, for better or worse, a round two coming up. And of course, I'll report to you the news and the analysis, unbiased and without the Western spin. I'm on YouTube now. Check the link in my TikTok bio for that. I'll be moving some videos onto there if you want to watch on YouTube, and making some YouTube content in the future. See you there.